Hello, everyone. Welcome to the monthly office hours call. Today we have Sam with us. Hi, Sam.
Hey guys.
All right. So this office hours is going to be primarily focused just on a one-to-one conversation with Sam, who's our in-house front-end developer. He's been doing lots of exciting stuff. So I'll just give a chance to Sam to introduce himself.
Sure. I'm sitting here fighting my Bluetooth headphones. I feel like I've been fighting that for the last 10 years. All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. All right, disconnected. Um, yeah, so I'm Sam Roberti. I've been with Parity and on the Ink team for about a year now. Um, I don't know if you want me to get into my past experience or just a quick intro.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah, we have time. Plenty of time for that.
Okay. Yeah. So I've been in the Web3 space for about 7 years now. I've been programming for over 13 years, and I came in the space because a former client still owes me a lot of money, and the traditional legal system kind of failed me, and I heard about smart contracts, and so I thought, okay, well, let me see if I can build a financial system, an application that would be trustless, where I wouldn't, have that situation again. So basically, I built I read Gav Wood's Mastering Ethereum. It was actually just before it was released. It was on GitHub. I pretty much memorized that book. I was just really fascinated by the idea. I was motivated because of many emotional reasons, and I started to build this escrow application. And the way it worked was a client would put money into an escrow. They wouldn't be able to withdraw it until like a week later. And then a client and any subcontractors or workers would have a fixed amount that they could withdraw whenever they wanted within that 1 week period. And there would be an incentive for the client, the company that's doing all the work, to perform, and so that you can maintain the relationship. And if the system was ever abused, then the company would no longer put money in there. So I built this whole thing, and at the time, smart, sorry, stable tokens didn't exist, and ETH was fluctuating all over the place. So I kind of abandoned the idea, but I stayed in the ecosystem for a while. Um, and I was also had a lot of client work in the Web 2 side of things. So I've worked with Bloomberg, Peloton, so the exercise bike company. I helped launch their e-commerce app in Australia, Germany, UK, New York City. That's where we were based. I've worked with a lot of different startups. This whole time, doing a lot of full stack type things. So APIs, microservices, and I've been using React since when it first came out. A lot of TypeScript, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So I've been in the space for a while. I've worn the designer hat. I've done front end work, back end, DevOps, quite a bit, and formerly an architect. So I actually used to do buildings.
I mean, that's also definitely got like interesting background, Sam. Also, I think it's important to note that you also went through the first cohort of BBA. You actually graduated together and joined around the same time.
That's right.
So, how did you feel about Polkadot and Ink?
It's been awesome. I mean, first of all, the PBA, that experience was awesome. Gurman is, I think, you were the youngest guy there, but we hit it off even before we were working together, and we found out that we both were hired by Parity and got to work in the same team. It was pretty fun. Um, so PBA was awesome, incredible experience. It was cool to kind of dive in, coming from the EVM side, and then to see the Polkadot and a lot of parallels and then improvements compared to the other ecosystem. Um, and then after joining the Ink team, it's been awesome. But my first impression of being on the team was that, yeah, everybody in our team specifically, you could trust them to do their job, and they're going to do it well. Like, everyone's very talented, motivated, reliable. It's 100% remote company. I think over 45 different countries. Pretty difficult to maintain, but like, our core team has been pretty fun to work with. I think the management has been great, and ink is a fun technology, and it's been this last year has been one of the most interesting times I think I've had as a programmer because it's such an innovative space, and I got to contribute to something at a core level.
So yeah, I think is it your first time when you came across ink? Was it at PBA or did you work at it before?
I haven't worked with it. I was aware of it. I've been following Polkadot for a long time. I actually signed up for one of the first meetups before Polkadot was even built. Gav had a meeting, a meetup. I think it was around the same, maybe like 2018, 2019, in New York City. I had signed up, but at the time I was commuting from New Jersey to
Oh,
go
that's
into New
funny.
York, and I ended up not going to it. But it was like OG, like the beginning days of Polkadot back then. And but I've been following it, reading up on the news, and ultimately came across Ink. Always wanted to dive into Rust. I had, attempted to start like all the different tutorials, and then I would do that, but then life and client work, became really busy. So when I went into the PBA, that was the first time I really got to dive in, and you know, thought it was awesome.
So how do you compare it to Solidity? Because you obviously like sounds of like a very, proficient Solidity user and engineer. So I would love to like, hear your professional opinion on the like production scale level of using ink in comparison with Solidity.
Yeah. So I'm gonna try to be as objective as I can here.
Of
You
course.
hear a lot of people say like, oh, like Rust has type safety and like and all these other features, and all those things are true. They're cliche. I don't want to just like repeat the things that have been said. And first off, I mean, I love Solidity. I think it's a fantastic language. You can do so much with it in production. It's been battle tested. Like it's great. It does its thing, and um, it's more simple compared to Rust, but you can do a lot with simple things, right? Like Excel sheets, you can build like very complex systems, and so there's nothing wrong with that. You give a developer a small set of tools, they're still going to engineer something really cool, right? Um, but with Rust, you do have the type safety. You have all the tools that come along with it. It's fun, and like personally, in my selfish reasons, I like working with Rust. It's fun to solve problems with it. The tools, um, I think, are very intelligent, and the enums and the way you can handle those things. So personally, I just like everything that Rust offers. Those are the things that I like, and they contribute to ink. And another big one for me, and this is really niche. I don't know if many people in the world even know about this feature or care about this difference, but for me, handling errors. So in Solidity, you can throw a revert, and then you get a string message for some error type, right? But since Ink version 4, you can now return results, and that'll show up in the JavaScript. So you'll have an OK and then an error value at the JavaScript level. So if you're going to return an error, you can actually define your own arbitrary data structure and return it. But what that means in the front end, or even for other smart contracts, is you can return contextual error data to the front end. And this is very helpful as a developer. I think you find this in the Web 2 system, right? Like you have APIs and they can return different types of errors and error codes and other data structures that you might agree upon. And you can do that with Ink since version 4. So things like that, I think, are pretty cool.
So, and I think the definitely things that you don't like about ink in comparison to Solidity, and then I would also like to hear your opinion on that.
Sure, that's a good question. Um, so, I mean, Ink is newer, and so one of the shortcomings it has in comparison with Solidity, the language in general, is there's not as many applications built in production. That's changing, with things like Incubator, which I know we're going to get into a little bit later. Um, but that would be the big one. And really, at the end of the day, if you're building a product, you need people in the ecosystem to use it. So there's just a bigger community on the EVM side. That's a huge one, and I've experienced that a lot too, because I'm not just a developer, but I've worked with a lot of startups and clients, and so I'm constantly working with product people. And one of the big concerns for them is, okay, well, who's going to actually buy these things? If we're working with like NFTs, digital collectibles, you need a community who has tokens in the ecosystem and is going to use it. So the market is a huge driver for what technology people are choosing. And ink can be awesome, but you need the ecosystem around it. You need the third party tools. So the EVM side, there's a few companies now where your grandma can go on and mint an NFT with her credit card because you have a trusted third party service that manages your wallet in the cloud. And they swipe their credit card, they log in with Facebook or username and password, and then they can mint. And what that does is it opens up the market to a bigger place. So that's not an ink specific like a language problem. That's just like a bigger comment about the ecosystem. That's changing, and we should drive the markets towards the better. I think the markets will adopt the better technology over time, but you need specific drivers for that. From a language level, that's a really good question. I don't think anything comes to mind. I think front end tooling, definitely needs a lot more support there. There's things like events. So on the front end, when you want to manage like events that get emitted, and not just in ink, this is in palettes in general, decoding that information and finding a sane way to um, decode, parse the information, and display it on a screen is there's a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. Maybe a couple files, and I think tools like that will make working with ink easier.
Yeah, I think like with Palace side of things, it's a bit just it's the whole point is it can be a little bit over configurable that there's so many parameters and things that needs to be done,
Yeah.
but also that's the other side of the flexibility that
Hmm.
Substrate comes with, and the whole idea behind it is to be like kind of opinionated entry level to the development on Polkadot.
Yeah.
But talking about ecosystem tooling, you've been working on a frontend library called useink,
Yeah.
like specifically dedicated to bringing these full stack applications, to the world, to the production level. And yeah, just want to ask you to talk a little bit more about it and what's so special about this library and how is it different from Polkadot.js or upcoming copy release.
Yeah. Um, so, all right, a lot of comments on that. So, first of all, I mean, so when I joined Parity and joined the Ink team, I built a lot of Web3 applications, full stack apps, in the past, and I'm very passionate about building products. So, Mickey and the guys, asked me to help build a game where developers compete with by writing smart contracts, and you try to paint a pixel on this board, right? So I had to build the front end, and there's this fish swimming around, and I think we're going to get into that a little bit later too for the Sub-Zero conference. But so as I started building this application, and the main JavaScript library out there for doing this is Polka.js. I found it was very difficult to learn. So, I mean, today I'm much more familiar with it. I think it's a great library and its role. So, one of your questions was, what's the difference between using? How does it differ with Cappy and Polka.js? Well, Polka.js, it's a very low level library. It's bare bones. How do you make calls to Substrate? It's not concerned about things like managing state and making a developer's life simpler. It's not a framework, right? It's really just like a low level library. So if you want to send a transaction to the blockchain, you have to do a lot of work, right? So you're going to have multiple files, and some of those things are like you import a function for some contract transaction, and it takes 5 arguments and the options. Well, all those arguments also need to be constructed. So you have to import, 3 more functions and construct them, and on and on and on. And so you have this huge code base, this boilerplate code that you need to set up. Now, Polkadot.js, again, it's not trying to make your life easy by having opinions about how to manage all that stuff, right? So it does what it does. Cappy has since been dropped as a project, so that's no longer in the picture. They're calling it an experiment now. I know there's a lot of work put into that, and you guys can read about that online. So right now, Polkadot.js is the standard for if you want to build a library, if you want to create a wallet, something in JavaScript. It's been battle tested. I think it's great. It has so many things in there, tons of packages. Now it's a small team. Some of the documentation has been out of date because it's a small team and it's tough to maintain all this stuff. And one thing in particular is the contract side of things. A lot of that documentation is out of date. When Polkadot released Weights V2, a lot of things broke. I'm not even sure if they've been updated yet. Transition into useink. What is useink? Useink is that opinionated framework. Under the hood, it's using Polkadot.js and a number of other packages. A lot of stuff from the Talisman guys or Talisman Connect, and taking bits and pieces, weaving them all together into an opinionated framework to make your life easier. So I mentioned before, if you want to make a transaction, you have to do all this boilerplate code. Instead of having 2-3 files to do all this stuff, you can do it in a single line of code because we do it for you in useink. So useink was actually came from the code of that game I mentioned earlier. So I came into the ecosystem. I was trying to learn Polkadot.js. It's like, wow, this is really hard. We need to simplify this for people. It doesn't matter if you have this cool backend technology that's trustless. If you can't build applications for it, if people can't interact with it, it's useless. So at that point, the team started to think about Ink as a full stack framework. And so useink is that front end component to make your life easy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like I've been following your work, and then I think you've released in 2 versions so far this year. I think it's pretty stable at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, we're up to version 1.14. I released that one yesterday, actually.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
so I mean, there's been tons of releases, and so another interesting point I think, which is worth noting, Polkadot.js and libraries like that, the low end side. So if you think of like a line or a spectrum, right? So all the way on the left, you have your Rust libraries and Substrate and Polkadot.js, your low end type stuff. All the way on the right side, you have your front end, your UI, and right in the middle, it was like an empty gap. There was nothing there to make life easy for developers so that they can connect the two pieces, right? And so useink sits right there. Now, as far as like the philosophy for building useink, and my personal philosophy for how you should develop that middle piece, I don't believe in the waterfall approach where you just have developers, they go into a corner, they build a library based on theory, what they think people are going to use, and then 3 months later they come back. It's like, oh, here developers go and build front end applications, guessing what people are going to need, right? Instead, what happened was this library came from building actual projects. So the stuff inside of useink are what developers need. This is stuff I've been using for the last 7 years in the EVM side, plus discovering new problems within Polkadot.js and situations. So things like little things. Let's say you want to make a transaction. Well, we provide hooks in React, right? So you can do use transaction, use TX, and it takes a couple of arguments. And you can do, you call send on that whenever you're ready. So a user clicks a button and then you kick it off. And what that's going to do is that's going to trigger your wallet to open up in the browser. And then you can sign it or reject it. And then everything updates, in your dApp. So the something little that I mentioned before is like, okay, maybe it throws an error or shows a success message. Well, so many times in a form, you just want to reset the state. So almost every single hook that we have in useink has a reset state thing. It clears the error, it sets everything back to the beginning, and there's small things, but you don't see these types of things in other applications because they're built in theory, not from the ground. And so many times I would have VS Code. I'd have 2 windows open. One was a useink repo, and the other one is a dApp that I'm building. And as I'm building my dApp, it's like, oh, I could really use this feature. And so I build it in useink, I deploy it, and then release that version, and then I keep going with the dApp side of things, right? So this thing was built organically, and one of the main philosophies, of useink has been build this alongside real dApps, and build what's actually needed.
I mean, that's awesome. I think the time when you started developing it, I think you were heavily inspired by EVM equivalent to use dApp frontend library,
Yes.
also using a hook. I think like how does it compare to use dApp, or like are there any other like kind of equivalents in the EVM world? So like we have like a better understanding like what libraries essentially
Yeah,
entails.
good question. So I would say it's very similar to used app and also WAGMI, so WAGMI. That's has become the go-to standard. When I first started way back in the day, it was Truffle, and they had their React stuff. And then Hardhat came out, and then used app. So I got into the React hooks things using an EVM for used app. I've contributed to them to the library in the past. Today, WAGMI has gained a little bit more popularity. And so there's a lot of similarities. Things like making it easy for you to connect your wallet, changing your wallet, triggering transactions. One of the big philosophies in use dApp is data parity. So making sure that all the data, every single function that you're calling, right? You're calling different functions, and you want to make sure that all the data that comes back is from the exact same block, right? Because if you have data from a previous block and then some data is from the new block, well, now you're showing wrong information, and then a person is going to go and drop something in a DEX, and it's bad information. So the idea of keeping all the data in sync, and so we do that in useink. It's a very important principle. Um, and Polkadot.js actually does not provide, to my knowledge, subscriptions to contract calls. Now you have subscriptions to pallets and other things, but not for like actual contract calls. So useink, what we do is we use a subscription to the block header, and every time that thing updates, that's what then triggers another call for all other functions within the contracts, right? So there's this data structure and this framework that we use to maintain parity between blocks. So that's one of the big ones.
Yeah, it sounds like a clever engineering down there. So then the obvious question I have, and probably like help for people, how can developers learn more about the library and use that in their projects?
Yeah, good one. So there's a bunch of resources out there right now. Um, Actually, right now is the first public mention of useink right now. So we haven't done any advertising, marketing.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, we do have documentation on the use.ink website. Now that's the website for the Inklang, the language. And if you go down halfway down the index on the left, you'll see front end, and you can dive into all the different documentation. So that's one place to get started. But honestly, like the most fun, if you're a developer, you know a little bit of React, I'd say go to the useink repo, right? The actual library repo, and check out the playground directory. Boot that React app up, and there's literally one page. It's just a big kitchen sink, and I was like, hey, I need this feature, so I'll just throw it in there and build against that. And if it works, it works. If it breaks, well, I know I need to fix it. So it's this kitchen sink of almost every single example in there. Then there's a second page within that little repo for deployment. There's an example for how you can deploy something. Now, in Polkadot.js, there's tons of steps that you need to do, but you could do this in 2 lines of code with useink. So, go in there, check out, use metadata and use deployer, and you'll learn all about that stuff. So the useink repo, check out Playground. And then the other thing is you can go to Ink Examples. There's another GitHub repo maintained by the Ink team. And there are PRs. These aren't merged yet. But there's the Submarine UI branch would be the fun one to check out. There's probably maybe like 8 different examples in there. Um, a really fun interactive UI with fish swimming around. There's a submarine view. So I'd check out those, yeah, those repos. But the playground would be the first one I'd go to. Yeah.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
one
That's
last
awesome.
thing. Also join the there's a useink element channel. So pop in there. Yeah, I'm usually in there. So you ask me a question. Other people in there help out as well. So
And where can you find the link?
you can find it from the go to use.inc. Check out the front end overview page, just like the useink section in the documentation. And there's a link to the element channel.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Sam. And I think there's also been another initiative you've been involved in, Sam, called Incubator. And do you want to talk a bit more about it? What's the background story behind that?
Sure.
And
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, one of the downsides of creating a new technology is your market reach, and the ecosystem and all the tools around it, those third party tools, etc. And so Incubator is an initiative to kickstart everything at once, right? It's a big goal. And so I was talking to Mickey about this. Meanwhile, Sota at A-Star, he wanted to create a grants system. He knew more about the Polkadot treasury and how all those pieces work. And his idea was, hey, let's create a grant system, and we'll have people coming and building a bunch of production applications using Ink, right? And so Mickey, he was talking to Sota. He's like, all right, talk to Sam, and we joined forces. My original idea was to take on a couple high-profile companies building on Ink, and we give them close support. Sota wanted to do more of the grants things, and then Mickey wanted to do to support the audit companies. So we would help professional companies who want to create a business in Ink doing security reviews and audits. Help them make money, kickstart that marketplace, because in order to have production ready applications, people need to trust it, and it's a huge piece for this ecosystem. So anyways, we combined all these different ideas, and Incubator was born. It is funded through the proposal right now. We were approved for the large sum. They had actually let me backtrack a little bit. We were originally approved, but they changed the voting system. There's a new system where you get approved for the lump sum, then you have to apply and get the curators approved. So the curators are a body of people who use multi-sig, and we can help manage the funds. So there's different projects underneath that umbrella of Incubator, and we're custodians of that. So right now we're at the current stage where we've added our application as our team, as a team of 6 curators, and it looks like we're passing with over 80 something percent right now. So we have the yays. There's 13 more days left there. So once that gets approved, then what we're going to do is we're going to create sub bounties, and then we'll be able to remit payments and help all the people that are in the ecosystem already. There's about 8. I believe there's 8 grant recipients in the program. You can go to use-incubator on GitHub, and that's they have ecosystem grants. You can see the projects that have been accepted in there. We have Starlight Finance comes to mind. They're building a compound V2 loan application, so similar to the EVM side of things, but doing it in Ink. Is Artisanal, which is an interesting project. It's like architecture focused, right? So helping resolve disputes within the architecture space. And then we have MuFi. So MuFi is like music finance, financial. It's a music royalties and international payments company. So they're looking to solve to build better trust between paying out music royalties and cross-border payments. They were accepted into the Builder track. There's a lot more technical projects in there. So this is the first wave. This is the first cohort. The applications are closed for this cohort, but in the future, seeing this is a Polkadot Treasury funded, in the future, for future cohorts, we would put in another request, get that voted on, and then we'd be able to do a second cohort. So keep an eye on Incubator. You can also find the website through the Ink homepage.
Awesome, Sam. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing on our agenda for today is our presence at Sub-Zero, our coming and developer conference taking place in Lisbon, 19th, 20th September. And let's talk a bit more about what we're going to do there.
Yeah. So it's game time. The official title is we settled on that, right? That's Ink Championship.
Yes. Yes, I do.
All right.
Yes.
So yeah, this is a pretty fun. This is the first project that I worked on when I came to Parity. I worked with Mickey and Alex, who's on the Contract Palace team. And so the way the game works is you have a central game contract, and then you have multiple player contracts. So as a player, if you're a developer, you come in, you want to participate. We have a starter ink contract called the player contract, and you're going to implement your business logic for one of the functions. You then register your contract with this central game contract, and then we're going to run a script, and it's going to trigger the moves for each player. And you see whoever has the best algorithm to paint a pixel on a board. There's a big board, and the size of it will change depending on how many players are. And whoever paints the most blocks and uses the least amount of gas earns the most points, and whoever has the most at the end wins. Now, if you try painting a block that somebody else has already taken, you waste gas and you don't get any points, right? So you actually lose points in that situation. So you're going to learn about how you can query another contract. You can read, hey, is this block taken? Not yet. Okay, try to write to it. And you'll learn a lot of the bare bone skills for making an ink contract. And it's also a really fun UI UX. So we have a talented illustrator on the ink team, and we have some animations going on there. So there's an ocean scene, fish swimming around. We got some game music, sound effects. Yeah, it's a fun game, and the ink championship.
Yeah, no
Yeah, you want to
spoilers.
give a little more
No
details
spoilers.
on the format?
Yeah, sure. It's going to be in the beginner's track. I think we've already been allocated a slot. It's going to be on Wednesday 20th at 2:05 p.m. It's going to be a 15-minute session. Uh, there's also going to be a developer from Aleph Zero team, Piotr, who's going to talk about a third-party tool, Drink. It's essentially kind of an extension for end-to-end testing framework that allows you to, test your smart contract like in end-to-end test fashion, but without running the actual node, because if running the node, it adds a lot of overhead. But with Drink, the whole idea is that it simulates public contracts, sort of like simulates the runtime. It allows you to, check the state of your contract at different blocks, at different, a different state of the runtime. And the whole idea behind the workspace is essentially walk the newcomer developers through the basic, development, kind of process of with using like Inklang, Rust, and those testing for frameworks, and then we are gamifying this experience with the workshop, with the game that Sam just described, and by the end of the session, you'll be expected to write a simple strategy for the game player's contract, and then we're going to end up with like a short, like 10-15 minute actual championship game session. And the top three players will receive some prizes in the form of NFTs. That's going to be initially assigned to them on the Rococo, but then you can claim them on I think on a statement. No, no, it's Asset Hub, right? Yeah, on Asset Hub on the Kusama chain. And so yeah, I think that's basically the format. I mean, if you want to maximize your chance of winning these three awesome looking NFTs, I definitely recommend you basically start learning Ink now, just playing around. You're not expected to like have a full developed strategy before the workshop, but it will definitely be beneficial for everyone.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think Sam and I are also going to be there for 2 days in Lisbon, and we'd love to chat with anyone who's going to be there as well, answering questions. I think now we have an app, and for the Polkadot events where you can schedule like kind of like one-to-one sessions with speakers. And yep, more than welcome to meet with any one of you who's here today with us. And yeah, anything from you, Sam?
No, that's about it. I forgot to mention, part of our auditor track as well for Incubator, we've got
Oh, right,
yeah,
okay.
Oak Security and Open Zeppelin. So you mentioned, you encourage people to learn Ink. I know those guys are very interested in Ink. We've been working with Parity a little bit recently, and that's a very good sign for the ecosystem. If you have a big fish like those guys interested in Ink, so I think we're in the right movement here.
Absolutely. And again, I just want to just remind everyone that again, if you have any questions with regard to the content what we talked today, feel free to raise your hand, jump on stage, and ask. Again, this is supposed to be a kind of interactive session where you can also like drop in and ask questions and talk about stuff that concerns you, interests you. If not, you can just pop in your message in a reply to this space, or like as Sam said, I think there is a Matrix channel where you can also ask questions about frontend library. There's a Stack Exchange where you can ask more technical questions with regard to Ink. And if you have any problems with Ink, you can always open GitHub issues. But unless there are no more questions for us, Sam, do you have any questions for me? Hello,
Oh, that was for
Sam.
me. I thought that was for the audience. Um, no, yeah, actually, quick. What are you working on at Ink right now, and what's the future release?
Oh, so the Ink 5.0 is kind of like it has a code name Open Zeppelin release. Like talking about Open Zeppelin, and we've been audited, and for the last I think couple of months, I've been actively working with other guys from the Ink team on closing off and addressing the recommendations and issues raised by the Open Zeppelin
Hmm.
report. And Inc. 5.0 is kind of like targets closing off, like resolving all those issues. Most importantly, all the critical medium severity issues are now resolved. Now it's basically just like a tooling improvements with cargo contract, like decoding, verifiable builds. Been the most recent one last month. There is like a couple of changes to do with metadata, like some minor issues, and I think like Ink 5.0 is not going to be like super major release, but there's definitely going to be some also cool features coming
Hmm.
up. But yeah, like right now I'm primarily working on preparing the workshop, reviewing it, and making the experience as smooth as possible.
Yeah. So you mentioned some changes in the metadata. That's actually another thing that I love about Ink over Solidity. I think the metadata is very mature. You can actually put in comments for specific messages and then actually use them in your UI. They have your whole type system in there. It's really powerful. What types of changes are you guys making there?
Are there not major changes like one of those like it's to be verifiable builds?
Okay.
And again, quite niche addition is to additional fields now is verifiable build.
Hmm.
It is image field that basically, like the problem with Phasm is that if you compile the contract on different operating systems, the Wasm blob is going to be basically different depending on architecture, different Rust toolchain,
Hmm.
and we cannot necessarily guarantee that everyone uses the same Rust toolchain. So there is need for like a sort of a verifiable, like, constant environment where no matter like what's the operating system, environment is, it will always produce it will always deterministically output the same binary, given that the code is the same. And that's important for block explorers that want to like identify contracts and verify the source code of the given contract,
Hmm.
like it's done on EtherScan. And the solution for that is to use Docker. And we've integrated a Docker build inside Cargo Contract. but also the primary changes to the metadata is that now it includes it has a field with image that specifies the image and tag name, tag and the image name of the image that was used to essentially compile, contract, and generate the vase and blob that later block explorers can pull and then verify the source code with. And the other change is to do with the static buffer. It's essentially like it's a very niche architectural component. So static buffer is like our own like implementation of the buffer that's used to encode and decode a scale from the scale binary format. And it used to be hard coded to 16 kilobytes. And with file with the off-chain smart contracts, that's essentially the limitation is like no longer like relevant because you're not essentially restricted by they essentially raised the limit of the memory allocated to each contract execution, and then they had this requirement for increasing the static buffer size to potentially decoding and encoding larger argument like larger slices of arguments that's supplied to messages. And the solution for that was to essentially modify that through the environmental variable. But also, I decided to add this as another field in the metadata. So when you deploy a contract, you also know like what's the static buffer size. It's not something critical that's going to be used in the front end, but it might be something useful for again another tooling that may potentially detect changes, deviations from the standard configuration in the smart contract environment.
Awesome. Yeah, a lot going on there. And so when are we going to see XEM? Is that version 6?
I mean, there are plans for XCM. I think there is parity roadmap. There is Ink roadmap, but and XCM is almost there from the poly contract side. I think it's just it needs to be supported on syntactical level on the Ink side.
Yeah.
And once all the OZ issues are closed, and I think that's going to be the primary focus. Like the next two things we're going to focus on is XCM and support for multiple chain extensions. And I think XCM is going to be just available through the normal like environmental like through normal environment, like you do like self.env block number or like chain extension. You're going to have another environmental function for the XCM. And with multiple chain extensions, that's essentially useful for like to kind of like bringing forward this concept of hybrid chains. And right now we kind of limit it to a single chain extension. And some of the production chains that have poly contracts deployed on them already expose some of the chain extension functions. But it's useful to support multiple chain extensions in the sense that you can have essential separation of concern, and then developers don't necessarily need to load the smart contract with supporting and maintaining like different host functions that's exposed by the chain extension.
Awesome. Good stuff.
Yep. There's definitely a lot going on, and like we also actively going through the audit reports, and we are also viewing like the recent changes and like reviewing some of the storage changes and see how we can improve. I think there's also been a discussion to do with the migration. We're trying to improve the patterns around upgradability, because this is also one of the kind of killer features and like it differentiates between Solidity and Ink, that you can essentially replace the code under the contract address. And the kind of the downside that comes with it is that if you have changes in storage, then you need to carry out a migration. In Polkadot, like so on Substrate, it's solved with there's definitely there's a procedure set up for that, but in Ink you kind of need to be a bit creative about that. There's no like kind of well-defined process for such an app storage migration, and right now there's kind of discussion around like standardizing this procedure. with either a delegate call, or we want to potentially introduce another function called on initialize. That essentially is a function that allows you to set up, specify how your storage will get initialized during the instantiation and the migration, which are going to be extremely useful for the storage migration when you execute set code hash
Hmm.
function.
Interesting. Yeah, I know on the Solidity side, you want to do upgradable contracts. I mean, you could just use OpenZeppelin's library, but under the hood, they're using assembly to change where that you're pointing to. So it's kind of it's a hack in there. I'm curious. This is more of a technical question, but do you know how that's done on the ink side? Is there any type of like magic, or is it just pure Rust to make that happen?
On with the set code hash specifically, it's architecturally different from obviously Solidity and EVM, uh, because in because in Substrate, in Poly contracts, you have a concept of a contract address and you have a concept of code hash,
Hmm.
and you can upload code where you don't necessarily need to instantiate it. And when you upload code, you essentially store code on chain. And the beauty of that, it also essentially saves the storage. If you try to deploy the same code literally, it's not going to upload it. It's just going to it's going to return the code hash of already deployed code. So what that means that, if everyone just trying to deploy the same contract, they essentially going to just reuse the same code hash, the same code instance that's already been deployed on chain, obviously. And of course, if you modify the code slightly, it's going to result in a different code
Hmm.
hash. So it's in different code instance being uploaded on chain, and then you can instantiate this code hash into actual contract different, like, numerous times. That's going to result in actually returning the contract address. So with set code hash, essentially what happens that you have a set, contract address, and you have a code hash associated with it, and you can essentially replace this code hash with a different one. So it happens that when you call a contract, so, the pilot contract's actually going to execute a different code hash that's associated with this with the given smart contract address.
Mm.
And what happens that, you want to upgrade the contract. Let's say, for the simplicity, uh, there's no storage migration, but like you add, let's say, an extra message that returns like basically like a getter message. Then you can essentially just upload. You can upload the code, like get your code hash, and then if your previous contract has a message that executes set code hash, you execute this message. You provide a new set code hash. You provide a new code
Hmm.
hash, and then after the execution, when the execution completes, essentially your contract now has a different code, a different code associated with
Yeah,
it.
that's cool. So so there's a
And
solution at the protocol level, and it's not a hack. Because as I mentioned
yeah, it's not
before,
a
like in
hack.
Solidity, I mean, you're actually writing Solidity, but then inside your function of within Solidity, you add assembly, and it's like really dangerous, unchecked, and it's just kind of like the Wild West, and it's a total hack. But it works. But it's cool that you guys are implementing it at the protocol level.
But like, with great power comes great responsibility too. Yeah, like you also need to be very conscious, and with using sidecode hash, if you leave this unrestricted, like if you don't have any sort of like a guards or assertions in place, then it can potentially be a vulnerability that like anyone can essentially replace the code hash of your given contract
Right.
address. So it's very important. Like it's like a substrate. Like if you just give it in plain sight, like let's say you just leave it, like expose this function that anyone can call it, then anyone can essentially replace the code of your contract and I don't like modify the state or like just completely hijack your contract and break it.
Right.
So it's very important, like to either like in authoritative way just set an admin of the contract and like for the given contract to the given account ID, and only that account ID can execute that message and that function, or you have some sort of governance in place. So there's definitely some sort of like a guard and like, that needs to be put in place, and this function also needs to be used effectively. And important bit that if you deploy your original contract without that function in place, like you don't have any like message that uses set code hash, then essentially you you can't upgrade the contract.
Yeah.
So if you like when you deploy a contract, you also need to think about, are you going to upgrade it in future? So if so, then you already, like, even before like uploading, you need to start thinking about the upgradability pattern and the upgradability functionality in
Right.
future. You can do it either, like, but on the other side, like, you can absolutely use the classical proxy upgradability patterns, like coming from the like Open Zeppelin facility in Ink
Hmm.
2. We have like all the atomic blocks for that. We have a delegate call, forward call. We have like reentrancy flags. It's all possible if you want to do it like in classic vanilla way.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we should mention too that within Ink, it also ties to Incubator as well. We have OpenBrush, which is modeled after the Open Zeppelin contracts. So a lot of these patterns are already done there. It's been pretty awesome. And through Incubator, the first project that Open Zeppelin is going to be doing is a security review of OpenBrush. So that'll be huge. Previously had received a grant. I'd say the majority of people in the ecosystem are using OpenBrush as their core library, and then extending and building their own in contracts off of that. So it's a great tool, and a lot of these patterns that we're talking about are already done in there that you can just extend.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for mentioning that, Sam. And I think we are approaching the end of the session. So, unless there are questions from the audience, I think we can conclude it there. Or, like, if there's one last few words you want to add, Sam.
Yeah, I guess what's next for, I mean, useink is my my passion here. So I want to we should end on that
Well,
note. In the
that's
future,
sweet.
I am going to be leaving Parity at the end of this month, and it's looking like my company might be taking over development of this through a Web3 grant. And so some of the features we'd like to introduce is we want to add light clients as a default. Um, and so instead of using, every time you want to interact with the blockchain, you're making a call through some cloud application, it's a third-party API. Your browser is now connected to other nodes, and you can personally verify cryptographically that the data is accurate, right? So trustless, there's no middleman. And so we want to set that as a default. And I mentioned before, like the event. So there's a lot of features and upgrades to, or additions to what we're building in useink. And one of the big ones is, it's called useink. And that could be misleading because it's actually use substrate. It works for any substrate application. But we want to add more hooks and JavaScript functions to make your life easier for interacting with any of the palettes. So develop that side of things. Um, but useink is contracts as a first-class citizen. Most of the developers in the ecosystem are going to be building on their contracts. They're not creating their own blockchains, right? You don't have many people building UIs for a blockchain if they didn't create the blockchain, right? But you're going to have a lot of dApp developers, and so this we want to bring this thing to make it easier for any substrate developer. We want it to be the front end library that dApp developers use. So moving forward, if you guys see anything, love your support. Get a +1. We have 2 more people left here in the call. If you want to give us a +1 in GitHub, much appreciated.
I already started. Sam. This is my favorite list.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm gonna fork it tonight. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, useink.
Great. Thanks,
Yeah.
Sam.
Thanks, guys.